Hello, I'm Beth Fishman, Program Manager of Addiction Services at JCFS Chicago. I'm also a clinical psychologist creating spiritual practices for the Jewish community. I was really honored when Rabbi Cohen asked me to create this program for Temple Jeremiah. During this session, we will learn about the Unatana Tokef prayer, about how it teaches us, step by step, about the power we have to change our relationship to fear. And we will practice each of these steps together. Please have something to write with as we begin. And if possible, listen to this session in a quiet place where you will not be interrupted. The Unatana Tokef is a really fierce prayer. It seems to fit the mood of the times because we're living in pretty fierce times. In terms of health, because of COVID, and politically, sociologically, psychologically, personally, we as a community and a country and the world are struggling, and we are fearful. So what can this fierce prayer on this fierce day teach us about how to live through and to live well with our deepest fears? Most religious or wisdom traditions have teachings on managing fear, as does Western psychology. And the Unatana Tokef gives us one set of instructions that Judaism teaches for this purpose. In the prayer, we are first reminded of the power combined with the deep love that the sacred has for us. And that power is to the good, waiting on us to return to the path that we were born to walk. Next in the prayer, though, we are bombarded by the frightening truth that this loving Creator also has the power to decide who shall live and who shall die in the year ahead, and how. This, of course, is a really famous section of the prayer and is definitely the most challenging. It brings up our fundamental fear of our own death and that of our loved ones. I remember at one point in my life, many years ago, I experienced a whole series of traumatic deaths in a short period of time. And this portion of the Unatana Tokef at Yom Kippur that year just absolutely terrified me. I remember thinking, who would be taken from me next? And how would I survive in the face of that kind of terror? I remember during services crying in grief and in fear in front of the whole congregation as I placed a stone on the wood of the bima in memory of those who were taken from me too soon. I think in part I felt overwhelmed because I hadn't then moved on to the next part of the prayer. Because finally, and thankfully, the Unatana Tokef tells that the divine decree, who shall live and who shall die, is not immutable. If we do three things, it says, we can influence the holy force. In other words, we can change the course of our lives with our own actions. Now, this can be taken literally, and it can also be understood metaphorically. Metaphorically, the message is that we can change our lives by changing our experience of the things that happen to us, the things that we think, and our relationship to these events and thoughts and our feelings, including fear, maybe especially fear. So this is an absolutely incredible message. It's saying that we are the opposite of helpless. We are powerful in our own lives. So let's look at and practice the steps we are given so that we can take from this holiest of days the actions that are needed every day to change our relationship to our thoughts and feelings and therefore our very lives. So the first instruction is tefillah, to pray. Now, having worked for many years with Jews in addiction recovery and their loved ones, I'm aware that many Jews do not pray. While at the time that the Unatana Tokef was written, it may have been an easy and an obvious ask for folks to pray, today I think this may be pretty big and uncomfortable. Prayer seems, I think, silly or just irrelevant to lots of us. It may feel awkward or like a waste of time. Still, we're instructed to pray so that we might change the decree of the Creator, changing the experience of our own lives. So we're going to take a moment now for you to think about your past prayer life and your prayer life in the present. In a moment, I'll have you pause this session and ask yourself to review your own experience of prayer. You might think about, do you pray? And if so, when and how? How has your prayer life changed over time? What does prayer mean to you? And maybe how do you even define prayer? You might ask yourself how you feel when you pray. Or if you're not currently praying, how do you think you might feel when you start to? So pause the session now and take a few moments to consider your relationship to prayer, past and present. And when you're done, turn the session back on, and we will continue. Now that you've looked at your past and current prayer life, let's look at how you might pray in the future. There is no one way to pray. The Siddur, the Jewish prayer book, prescribes our communal prayer, but the Torah gives many, many examples of personal and spontaneous prayer, if one defines prayer as speaking to or being in dialogue with the sacred. Our ancestors spoke to the divine creator very intimately, from Abraham's arguments in favor of saving the town of Sodom to Moses' cry, El na rafana la, please God, heal her, please, when his sister Miriam fell ill. Any interaction you consciously have with a power greater than yourself is a prayer. There is a divine mystery to whom we can reach out. And in doing so, we make a space in our lives for that energy to flow in and to help us. In fact, even just imagining moving yourself over a step or two for the sacred to come and sit in your life with you is a prayer. Let's take another moment now to write about what your prayer life might look like from this moment forward. Will it be every day at the same time, like when you wake up with the Moda'ani, or at nighttime with the bedtime Shema? Will it be in your moments of need, of overwhelm, when you simply remember to say, help? The writer Anne Lamott claims that all prayers boil down to three concepts: help, thanks, and wow. Maybe right now, all you need are help prayers. Maybe sometimes a thank you, toda rabah, will come to your mind. You might take walks in which your deep focus is on nature's beauty, which certainly no human could have created. Or you might sit quietly and just sort of hold the sounds of the natural world in your mind, like a wide, clear, open basin. Any of these ways makes room for the holy to sit with you in your life and help you face the fears of the day. So take a moment now, pause the session, and write down how you will begin your prayer life tomorrow. And turn the session back on when you're ready. So we've now examined the first instruction for bringing the power to change our thoughts and our relationship to fear with tefillah, with prayer. The next instruction we're given is to repent or to do tshuva. Now, if you're like me, repentance is not a part of your daily vocabulary, which makes it a little harder to work with. An everyday word for tshuva is returning, which is related to the Hebrew words for turning, answering, sitting, resting. And they all have to do with going back to one's natural state. So if we have gone off course in some way, returning is the action we take to correct our course. It's about returning to our honest and true selves. Now, what does this have to do with relieving fear? Pretending to be anything other than the faulty human we are is false. And living a falsehood instead of acting out of truth, that in itself creates fear. So instead of that, we walk the path back to an honest view of ourselves, which we do in part by admitting our faults out loud. It's a really powerful way to be relieved of the fear of living a lie. I once heard that the difference between ourselves and the angels is just consistency. We, of course, are human. We're not angels. And therefore, we will be inconsistent, and we will lose our way, and we will go off course. In the 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and all the other anonymous programs, the 5th step is that we admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And then we clean up the messes to the best of our ability, as long as we don't hurt anyone else in the process. As Jews, we do this at least once a year, if not daily. We put down our wings, so to speak, if we had fooled ourselves into thinking that we were angelic. Instead, we look at our 2 very human feet in their running shoes or sandals or boots, and we move over a couple of steps to make room for the sacred that is greater than the angels. And we admit our mistakes, we apologize, we clean up the mess, and we repair the damage. Just be yourself out loud, your wonderful, mistake-making self. And just that will greatly reduce the fear in your life. Let's stop again to identify one mistake that you have made for which you have not yet done tshuva. You have not returned, and what you intend to do about it. Do this with compassion for yourself, because being born human, you really have no choice but to be someone who will hurt others. There's a midrash that says that God created tshuva before God created humans, knowing that the need for tshuva would be there right from the start. So in this, we aren't looking for self-shaming, but just for the simple truth. And then turn the session back on when you're ready. We've now examined the first instruction in the Unatana Tokef, which is tefillah, or prayer, and the second, which is tshuva, or returning. Lastly, we are told to do acts of loving kindness, to be kind with love. In the journey of addiction recovery, this is referred to as being of service. And once I heard a really touching quote that said, "Lord, make me a blessing for someone today." I have a little plaque on my desk that says, "Be a blessing." Just that, be a blessing. Now this plaque, this saying really helps me with fear. For example, I'm not a huge fan of the telephone. And once in a while, I have a feeling of unease before a phone call. I can't always say why, but I'm aware that it's there. So I look at this little plaque and I say this little phrase, "Be a blessing." Be a blessing. And it helps me remember that this phone call is not about me. It's not about my performance in some way. It's about how I can be of service to the caller. How can I help somebody else? And that changes everything about my fear. That change in perspective changes everything about my fear. The point is to take the focus off of oneself and put it on another, on someone else. And doing this naturally alleviates fear. The reason is that fear is very self-focused. When we're fearful, we're actually thinking about ourselves and our feelings. Even if the fear is for another person, we're still absorbed in our own thoughts and feelings. So doing something active for someone else makes this kind of self-absorption impossible. It's like an immediate antidote for fear. So there are, of course, endless ways to be of service, to be a blessing. And if through our prayers we have made a little space or a big space for the sacred to live with us in our lives, we may have a better sense of how we can be of service at any particular moment. So let's take a moment to see in what ways you are already being of service, because I have no doubt that you are. And also think of a way that you want to be of service but have not yet maybe found the courage. The ways that you allow a holy energy into your life might lessen your fear enough to be of service in new ways. So pause the session now. And when you're done thinking about or writing about your past and future with service work or being a blessing, turn the session back on. So in wrapping up, pretty soon we're going to move forward after Yom Kippur ends. We eat and celebrate in the break fast. And tomorrow there may still be a kind of an essence, a whiff of the awe and the fierceness of our community's efforts over the holidays. But of course, that will fade. But now you have your instructions. You have your marching orders, so to speak. In tefillah, in prayer, you will experience inching over to make a little space for the sacred to sit in your life with you. And you'll see what that's like. You'll see what impact that has on your experience of your own fears. Through tshuva, returning to your honest self, you will be admitting your vulnerable humanity to yourself and before the sacred and to others, so you can put down this fear of imperfection and be your honest, imperfect self who keeps trying to do better. And through acts of service and love, you will be taking the focus off of yourself and off of your fears and putting that energy into helping others. Watch your life with prayer, with returning, and with acts of kindness in love. You are taking care of what has been given you to do. You will still have your burdens. You'll still have your fearful times, but you won't be alone with them. You can admit any part of them that puts you off course and return to center. And you can go love on folks who need it, because fear simply withers in the face of love. Thank you, Toda Rabah, for joining me today.